Thank you, Madam Chairman, and a bigger thank you to the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame. And I am overwhelmed and deeply honored, like never before in my life, at being part of this, you might say, extravaganza, so reminiscent of the Hollywood Oscars. You know that the events for which I am being inducted tonight took place some 60 to 70 years ago. It is such a good feeling to be remembered after so many years, and better still to be honored as I am being tonight, together with such other more worthy inductees. When you think of it historically and by my age, 70 years is a long, long time. You might say, and I'm sure a lot of you people think of this in your own hearts, that I have the distinction of being the oldest has-been being inducted here tonight. How did it all start? I grew up in the 40s or 50s and 50s in the north end of Winnipeg. Somebody else mentioned the north end earlier. I grew up in the north end. It was a tough growing up in that period of time in my preteen years, 75 years ago, being the skinniest kid on the block. Carrying my violin case down the streets of the north end, walking to my music teachers for violin lessons, and being made fun of and chased and bullied by some of the older kids. Some of them calling out names like, hey, Heifetz, hey, Rubinoff, hey, kid, what do you got in that violin case? Well, I got no respect in those years. I got no respect. That did not come until I showed that I could outsprint everyone in touch or flag football, in soccer, corner lot baseball, and at the church picnic races. There are a lot of people I want to thank for the help in putting me here tonight. Many are no longer with us, unfortunately. But first of all, I have three friends of mine who started out with me in high school, forming a formidable relay team that we practiced at high school, which was Isaac Newton High School at that time. And we raced at the Scottish Games on numerous occasions at Polo Park, and again later on at the Assiniboia Downs, beating some of the other pretty well all of our opponents, including teams made up of people like Dick Teddamanti, Sandy Gibb, Kenny Little, and so on. They are here tonight. They're at my table. I wonder, could you put up your hands, fellas? I can't see very good. There they are. That's Ted Rannick, who became Director of Recreation for the City of Winnipeg after Charlie Barber. And the other two, Wilbur Wagner and Ed Solars, they went on to play a lot of soccer for the IPAC and other soccer teams in Winnipeg at that time. Now to some other thank yous, and I have several of them here. I'd like to philosophize more. I'd like to take more time talking about things that happened, but I do owe an awful lot of thank yous to people that helped me, that discovered me, that coached me, that encouraged me, and so on. And the first one I want to refer to is Russell Pastick, a phys ed teacher that we had in King Edward Junior High School back in the 40s. And he thought I could run, and he thought I should be able to high jump too. He encouraged me in both sports, and I really appreciated it. That was way back in the 40s, but I was able to reciprocate with Russ Pastick in about 1958 or 1959 at the Assiniboia Downs racetrack where they were holding the Scottish Games at that time. I was there with my relay team, and I had been coaching a young up-and-coming sprinter by the name of Bobby Fisher-Smith at that time. I been coaching him for about a year, and we came out to the Scottish Games that year. Bobby Fischer-Smith won the junior 100 and 220, and I still in 1958 or 59, I think it was, I won the senior 100 and 220-yard dash at that time. Russ Pastic was so impressed. When I introduced him to Bobby Fischer-Smith, he took no time in recruiting Bobby Fischer-Smith to enroll at the St. John's High School, where he was at that time, requiring Bobby Fischer-Smith to trek all the way about 2 miles or so to high school at St. John's instead of 1 or 2 blocks to Sisler, where he was closer to. So that was Russ Pastic, who I owed a lot of thanks to. Then came Ken Yost, coach of the YMCA track team at that time, the first track team that I belonged to. I worked under him for about a year or so. Then Ken Yost went on to coach the Canadian track and field team in the 1948 Olympics, and then later on in the Pan Am Games in 50 and so on. From there, I went to Alec Lawrence. Alec Lawrence's track team over at Sargent Park, and we didn't ride there. We took our bikes there. We didn't have digital cameras to take pictures of all these action shots that you see today. And we took our bikes. We were pulled over by police for rolling through intersections and getting tickets for that. What happens to these police? We don't see them around anymore today. So I had those kinds of experiences. But running under Alec Lawrence, it was a real pleasure because the better track sprinters in Manitoba were under Alec Lawrence at that time. Dick Tadamanti, Sandy Gibb, Kenny Little, Jerry Dugan, and so on. And this was a real learning experience. From there, I went into 1949 and stayed in Toronto for the summer, training under Lloyd Percival, director of Sports College, CBC Sports College. And running under him, I was a member of the Canadian relay team, winning the Canadian 4x110 relay race in the Canadian Championships that year. From there, I went to, I was encouraged by Eric Hoy and Sven Sixson, two champions of the British Empire Games in the past years, who encouraged me to keep up with the sport, and I really appreciated their help. From there, I went to the University of Kansas for a couple of semesters, and I worked under Bill Easton, coach of the track team there, and where I met Wes Santee, who was supposed to be the first American to break the 4-minute mile. He never did that. Landy and Bannister beat him to it. But I also bumped into Wilt Chamberlain there at the University of Kansas. He was there for the first year in playing basketball, and he was also a high jumper. I didn't know that. So from there, then I also want to give a big thanks to the Canadian Legion, who sponsored the Canadian Olympic training plan in Toronto that I was invited to attend for about 3 seasons. I really give them a lot of thanks. They were also very active at the Peace Gardens. I was never a part of that, but they deserve a lot of plaudits for that. And then I come to one of the last of my big track and field assistants or encouragers, and that was Mr. Manitoba track and field himself, Mr. Jim Daly. And he is here tonight, and I owe him an awful lot of thanks. He became, after his running career ended, he stayed with the Amateur Athletic Union of Canada, became president of the Manitoba branch here in Manitoba. And at that time, the rules of amateurism were strictly enforced at that time, and not so much today, I'm afraid. Jim was very involved. He had all kinds of ideas, and he arranged for interprovincial and inter-university track meets with the Manitoba track runners and the United States and other provinces. I was still able to take part in some of them. He also was revived cross-country and road races in Manitoba, all leading up to the very popular today half and full marathon races. But most of all, Jim's brainchild, the 1967 Pan Am Games that were held in Winnipeg, that he was CEO of, and he was able to run successfully in Winnipeg on such a small budget and with a lot of volunteers, not requiring the $4.5 billion that Toronto needed this past year. And I have to thank my family, Dr. Lloyd Bartlett, for keeping me alive all these years. And finally, I'm going to thank my parents too, but I want to borrow from Dustin Poss, remember the actor Dustin Hoffman, his acceptance speech at the Oscars a few years ago. And my thanks are to my parents, like his, for not practicing birth control. Thank you very much.